Aarav Nandan never imagined his dream of meeting Maribelle Krauss would turn into a waking nightmare. But the moment he stepped inside her decaying Florida home, he realized every message, every photo, and every promise had been part of a trap crafted by a woman whose secrets were far heavier than her 380-kilogram frame. Aarav Nandan's life had always been predictable, shaped by routine and quiet habits that kept him hidden from the world. He lived in a modest two-room apartment in a crowded part of Delhi, where the streets were always noisy, but his own existence remained silent. Each day began with the sound of traffic and ended with the glow of his computer screen, the one place where he felt seen. His job as a software technician demanded long hours, but he preferred it that way because the busier he stayed, the less he had to confront the emptiness that filled his life. Most evenings, after finishing work, he sat alone with a cup of tea and logged into online gaming forums, hoping to escape his loneliness by connecting with strangers who knew nothing about him. It was in one of these online spaces that he first met Maribelle Krauss, a woman living thousands of miles away in Florida. Her profile caught his attention because it felt different from the others. She rarely posted pictures, and when she did, they were always close-ups of her face, softly filtered and often dimly lit. She claimed to be shy and private, someone who didn't enjoy being photographed. Aarav understood that feeling well, which made him feel closer to her. Their conversations started casually, simple comments left on each other's game progress, or short messages exchanged during late-night matches. Over time, these small interactions became the highlight of Aarav's day. As weeks passed, Aarav began rearranging his schedule so he could be online when Maribelle was active. He skipped social events at work, declined invitations from distant relatives, and stopped visiting neighbors he used to chat with. His attention narrowed until only Maribelle mattered. She spoke about her struggles with anxiety, her fear of leaving her house, and her loneliness that felt exactly like his. Aarav believed they shared the same wounds, and he convinced himself that he understood her better than anyone else ever could. He started imagining a future where they might live together, supporting each other in ways the world had never supported them. Maribelle often mentioned how much she wished someone cared enough to visit her, but she always said it in a way that sounded hesitant and fragile. Aarav took those hints as unspoken wishes. He believed she needed someone to show her she was valued. The idea of surprising her began as a small thought, but it grew quickly into a plan that consumed him. He started saving money by selling old gadgets, cutting down on personal expenses, and accepting freelance tasks outside his normal job. Every rupee he earned felt like a step closer to her. Aarav told no one about his plan. He feared judgment, and more importantly, he felt that revealing it might break the fragile connection he had with Maribelle. He imagined standing at her door, watching her surprise turn into joy as she realized he had traveled across the world for her. That image kept him motivated through sleepless nights and stressful days. When he finally found a budget flight to Florida, he booked it without hesitation. The confirmation email made his heart race. It felt like he had taken control of his destiny. Before leaving, Aarav packed his belongings carefully. He included small gifts he believed she would appreciate, a handcrafted bracelet, a set of scented candles, and a book about managing anxiety. He wanted her to know that he paid attention to everything she said. On the morning of his departure, he stood in the doorway of his apartment and looked back at the life he was leaving behind. He felt nervous, but hopeful, convinced he was walking toward something meaningful. What Aarav didn't realize was how little he actually knew about the woman he believed he loved. He had trusted filtered photos, brief messages, and the warmth of a stranger's words. The truth that waited for him in Florida was nothing like the story he had built in his mind. And the moment he stepped onto the plane, his fate quietly shifted toward a reality far darker than he could ever imagine. Aarav's excitement slowly faded as he left the airport in Florida, entered a neighborhood far different from the bright, lively places he had imagined when thinking about America. The taxi ride took him down empty streets, lined with aging houses, each one silent and worn out. The afternoon sun made the peeling paint on the buildings look even more faded. As the car stopped at Maribelle's address, Aarav stared at the house for several moments, trying to convince himself he was in the right place. The structure looked abandoned, with the porch sagging under its own weight and weeds crawling through cracks in the walkway. Nothing about it matched the cozy home Maribelle once described. With his suitcase in hand, he approached the front door. His heart raced with anticipation, but the feeling darkened when he noticed the door slightly ajar. The faint smell drifting from inside made him hesitate. It reminded him of spoiled food and damp fabric, a scent that suggested the house had not been aired out in months. Despite the warning signs, he stepped inside, expecting to find a shy woman too nervous to greet him at the door. Instead, he found a hallway filled with clutter. Stacks of old newspapers blocked most of the wall, while empty food containers created a messy path leading deeper into the house. Every step he took made the floor creak loudly. Dust-covered furniture and broken fans were scattered around, as if the house had been frozen in time. Aarav forced himself to move forward, believing Maribelle must be living with more difficulties than she had ever admitted. He remembered her talking about anxiety and isolation, and he assumed these conditions were the result of emotional struggles, not deception. The deeper he walked, the heavier the air became, thick with the smell of decay and neglect. His shoes stuck slightly to parts of the floor where spills had dried. The hallway eventually opened into a dimly lit living room. There, he noticed something that made his stomach twist. Dozens of cardboard boxes filled with unopened delivery meals. Some were fresh, while others had expired long ago. The boxes were stacked against the wall like towers, creating narrow walkways between them. It was clear that someone inside relied completely on these deliveries and rarely moved around the house. Aarav's worry grew. He wondered why she had never mentioned any of this. Then, he saw a door at the back of the room, partially open. A faint humming sound came from inside, mixed with shallow breathing. As he pushed the door gently, his eyes widened in shock. Maribelle Krauss lay on a large reinforced bed built with metal frames and additional supports. She was far heavier than any photo had hinted, around 380 kilograms, her body almost immobile. Machines nearby monitored her movements, and large fans attempted to keep the room from overheating. The air was thick with the smell of medicine and sweat. Aarav froze. The woman he believed he knew online was nothing like the person in front of him. Her face, though familiar, was fuller and strained, her features lost behind layers of weight. He felt overwhelmed by confusion, betrayal, and guilt all at once. But even more unsettling was what he noticed next. On a table beside her bed were several notebooks. Each one had lists of men's names, many crossed out in heavy black ink. Only one name remained uncrossed, circled again and again: Aarav Nandan. The sight of his own name repeated so obsessively made his chest tighten. He realized that he had stepped into something far more complicated than loneliness or insecurity. The room felt like a trap built over years, constructed by someone who had carefully shaped an online persona while hiding an entirely different reality. And now that he was here, there was no easy way to leave without uncovering why his name was the only one left untouched. Aarav spent his first night in Maribelle's house sitting upright on a dusty sofa, unable to sleep as the sounds of the old structure echoed around him. Every creak, every hum from the machines in her room, and every shift of weight from the unstable floorboards made him feel as though the house itself was watching him. His mind replayed the images from earlier: the cluttered rooms, the mountains of food deliveries, the notebooks filled with names, and Maribelle's enormous figure lying silently in the dim light. He tried to convince himself that she had simply been ashamed of the truth, that the lies were a result of insecurity rather than something sinister. But as morning approached, that explanation felt increasingly fragile. When sunlight slipped through a crack in the boarded window, the house looked even worse. Dust floated through the air like drifting ash. The smell of stale food grew stronger as the temperature rose. Aarav decided he needed to understand the situation before panicking. He began cleaning small areas of the living room, hoping to bring some normalcy into the space. As he moved boxes aside, he found old receipts, expired medicine bottles, and piles of unopened mail addressed not only to Maribelle, but to several other names he didn't recognize. Some letters were marked overdue, while others were notifications of canceled services. It was clear she had not been managing her life properly for a long time. In the kitchen, the situation was worse. The refrigerator was packed with frozen meals, many arranged in large quantities as if ordered in bulk. A separate freezer beside it was filled with ice cream tubs and sugary snacks. Most labels showed automatic weekly deliveries. Aarav browsed through the delivery printouts scattered on the counter and noticed payments coming from various digital wallets. Each transaction had a different name attached to it. This was the first sign that her online relationships were not just emotional, they had financial patterns. As Aarav continued exploring, he realized Maribelle had been communicating with multiple men online, not only for company, but also for support. She seemed to have crafted a strategy: build emotional connections, gain sympathy, and slowly persuade them to send money, often justified as medical expenses or anxiety-related needs. It wasn't unusual for lonely people online to seek comfort, but the amount of money and the long list of names made it clear this was a deliberate, repeated method she had used for years. Inside a cabinet near her bedroom doorway, Aarav found a box filled with cheap mobile phones. Each phone was labeled with a different man's first name. Some still displayed unread messages, begging for updates, or expressing worry. Staring at the devices, Aarav felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't one of many, he was the only one who had crossed an ocean for her. And she had kept his name separate, circled, highlighted, obsessed over. When he finally stepped into her room again, the air was thick and warm. Maribelle remained motionless, her breathing slow but heavy. Machines around her buzzed, recording her heart rate. A large monitor beside the bed displayed camera feeds from around the house. There were cameras near the entrance, the living room, the kitchen, and outside the front door. Aarav realized she had been watching his every move since he arrived. She hadn't spoken, but she didn't need to. Her systems tracked everything for her. Throughout the day, he tried to regain control of his situation. He checked his phone, only to find the battery drained faster than usual. Several apps appeared to have been disabled. It was as though someone had tampered with the device. The unease grew inside him as he started imagining what Maribelle expected from his visit. Was she planning to keep him here? Did she see him as her final option after years of isolating herself? Aarav wanted to leave, but something made him stay a little longer. Curiosity, fear, responsibility. He wasn't sure. Everything in the house suggested danger, yet he couldn't ignore the vulnerable woman lying in the bed, nor the unsettling feeling that he had stepped into the center of a pattern far more complicated than simple deception. Every discovery hinted that something deeper was unfolding. Something he had yet to understand, but he sensed the truth was far darker than he was ready to face. A storm rolled in late that evening, darkening the sky until it looked almost bruised. Rain hammered the rooftop with steady force, making the entire house tremble under the weight of thunder. The sudden drop in temperature caused the old wooden walls to contract, producing sharp, cracking sounds that echoed through the halls. Aarav sat on the edge of the sofa, tense and alert, feeling the atmosphere shift into something heavier, something warning him that the fragile balance inside the house was about to break. He attempted to distract himself by organizing a corner of the living room, but the unsettling silence from Maribelle's room grew louder in his imagination. The storm provided the perfect background for fear. Every flicker of lightning illuminated the room, just enough to reveal the dust and chaos surrounding him. When the power briefly dipped, causing the lights to blink, he realized how vulnerable he was in a place filled with broken wiring, rotting wood, and unstable floors. The feeling that he was not supposed to be there intensified with every passing minute. A sudden crash from the kitchen made him jump. It wasn't the subtle sound of shifting objects. It was violent, like something large had fallen. When he rushed inside, he found several metal shelves collapsed on the floor. Glass jars had shattered, and their contents spread in thick patterns across the tiles. A heavy food storage container had rolled toward the doorway, leaving a trail of sticky liquid behind. Aarav knelt to start cleaning. But then he noticed something strange at the edge of the debris. One of Maribelle's notebooks lying open. The notebook had not been in the kitchen earlier. Someone must have moved it. As he picked it up, he felt the pages damp from the storm's humidity. His eyes fixed on a single page filled with his name written repeatedly, each line more frantic than the last. The ink grew darker toward the bottom, pressed into the page so firmly that it bled slightly through. Taped beside the list was a printed boarding pass for a return flight to India dated 2 weeks in the future. It had his full name, seat number, and passport details. He hadn't booked it. The realization froze him in place. Someone had accessed his personal accounts. His pulse quickened as he hurried back to his suitcase. The zipper hung loosely, open just enough to confirm his fear. His passport was gone. His documents were disturbed. His wallet had been moved. A wave of panic washed over him as he tried to piece together what had happened. Maribelle had barely moved all day, but that didn't mean she was powerless. She had access to cameras, electronic lifts, remote controls, and possibly someone else helping her. Or worse, she had been planning this long before he arrived. Trying to remain calm, Aarav examined the camera feeds mounted around her bed earlier that day. He realized the cameras weren't only for watching her surroundings, they also recorded constantly. Every time he slept, moved, or used his phone, it was documented. She had been monitoring him with precision. The idea of leaving immediately took root in his mind. He didn't care about the storm or the danger outside. The risk of staying outweighed everything else. Late into the night, when the storm reached its loudest point, Aarav quietly gathered what belongings he still had and walked toward the front door. But before he could unlock it, a mechanical worry sound echoed from the hallway behind him. He turned and saw a metal medical lift blocking the narrow passage. The lift, controlled electronically from her bedside remote, was positioned exactly where he needed to walk. Even though she couldn't leave her bed, she could still trap him using the machinery built to support her weight. His heartbeat pounded as he realized she had anticipated his escape. Without thinking, he rushed to the side window near the living room, pushed it open, and jumped out, despite the shards of broken glass that cut into his arm. The cold rain hit him instantly, washing away dust and blood as he stumbled into the muddy yard. He ran across the soaked ground toward the nearest house, slipping more than once, but refusing to stop until he reached a porch light glowing faintly through the storm. When he banged on the door, a startled neighbor appeared and immediately called emergency services after seeing his injuries and terrified expression. Aarav felt his legs give out as sirens began to approach through the rain, signaling that whatever nightmare he had stepped into was finally being exposed. The storm outside raged on, but the real darkness remained inside Maribelle's house. Hidden among her secrets and the plans she had almost succeeded in carrying out, Detective Sloan Halberg arrived at the scene shortly after paramedics began tending to Aarav's injuries. The rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the neighborhood drenched and eerily quiet. Flashing lights from police cars illuminated the soaked ground, creating distorted reflections that made the entire street look surreal. Aarav sat wrapped in a blanket on the neighbor's porch, shivering more from shock than from cold. Every few seconds, he glanced toward Maribelle's house, as if expecting something else to emerge from within. The paramedics asked him routine questions, but his scattered thoughts made it hard to answer clearly. When officers entered the residence, their radios crackled with a mixture of confusion and caution. The overwhelming smell of decay met them instantly. Deputy Carl Reddick, one of the first inside, described the interior as a maze of clutter and collapsing structures. He noted piles of unopened meals, rotting leftovers, and tangled wires, connected to various machines used to monitor and assist Maribelle. The scene was unsettling. But what disturbed the officers most was the level of planning evident in the arrangement of devices, notebooks, and surveillance equipment. Everything hinted at a long-term pattern of control. Maribelle was found in her room, unable to move but fully conscious. Medical staff had to be called in to safely transfer her due to her size and condition. She remained silent, staring blankly ahead as officers examined the notebooks stacked beside her bed. Every notebook contained lists of names, financial details, emotional notes, and tracking logs. Investigators quickly realized these were not the journals of someone seeking love. They were records created with precision. It's almost like case files. Each entry documented conversations, financial transactions, behavioral predictions, and methods used to maintain emotional dependence. A more alarming discovery came from the digital investigation that followed. When detectives inspected Maribelle's equipment, they found years of online activity across multiple platforms. She had created dozens of identities, many of them linked to fake photos and fabricated personal stories. The money she collected through emotional manipulation added up to a significant amount. Her victims were mostly isolated individuals who had been convinced they were helping someone fragile and alone. The depth of her deception painted a bleak picture of calculated exploitation hidden behind the facade of loneliness. Meanwhile, Aarav was transported to a medical facility for observation due to exhaustion, mild dehydration, and the injuries he sustained from the broken window. A psychologist, Dr. Tessa Morwood, met with him to assess his mental state. She explained that people like Maribelle often used isolation and dependency to trap their victims emotionally. While Maribelle's physical condition made the situation unusual, her psychological tactics were common among certain types of manipulators who relied heavily on controlled environments. Dr. Morwood emphasized that Aarav's willingness to travel across the world had made him vulnerable to the final stage of Maribelle's influence. As the investigation progressed, police discovered that her obsession with Aarav had grown stronger than with her previous targets. He was the only one who responded to her subtle suggestions about longing for company. His caring nature and isolated lifestyle made him the perfect candidate for her to fixate on. Investigators believed that she had planned to keep him in the house, indefinitely using emotional pressure and his lack of local support. His passport being stolen and his accounts being accessed only confirmed that theory. News of the incident spread through the community, causing shock and disbelief. Some neighbors admitted they had seen food deliveries piling up for years, but never questioned it. Others mentioned hearing sounds from the house during late hours, but assumed medical equipment was responsible. Very few people had ever seen Maribelle, and even fewer had spoken to her. Her isolation had allowed her to keep her hidden life intact without drawing attention. When the final report was filed, Detective Hallberg described the case as a rare intersection of emotional manipulation, psychological instability, and extreme physical dependency. He emphasized how easily trust could be twisted into something dangerous when built on fabricated identities. Aarav was cleared of all suspicion and was offered support services until he could return to India. Before leaving Florida, Aarav stood outside the medical facility where Maribelle had been taken. A quiet heaviness settled over him as he realized how drastically his life had changed. What began as an attempt to find love had turned into an encounter with a disturbing world he never imagined existed. The scars on his arm would heal, but the emotional imprint of the experience would remain with him forever. He boarded his flight home with the painful knowledge that he had escaped something far darker than heartbreak. It survived a place where trust became a weapon, carefully sharpened by someone determined never to be alone again.